Hi, I'm Kelly Vaughn, and welcome to Inside Indy. We're going to start tonight's show off with a question. And the question for you is, 911, what's your emergency? Well, we have a mental health crisis on our hand. That's part of the answer, and here to address the question and the answer is Dr. Elect Starr. You are a licensed mental health counselor.
Yes.
And owner of Unlimited Possibilities, LLC, and mental health counseling services here in Indianapolis. Welcome to Inside Indy.
Thank you for having me, Kelly.
Well, that's a loaded question at the opening of the show, and we have all been through so much.
Indeed.
And I think it started in 2020, about March, and right before that, interestingly enough, Kobe Bryant was killed in a helicopter crash, and weeks after that, we got hit with a pandemic. So we've been through a lot, and we have a mental crisis on our hands.
Absolutely, Kelly. Now, I have done a lot of reading about getting just research information on what is happening in our world around us and how is the pandemic affecting us. As a therapist, I care about people. But I not only care about my clients, I care about the community, I care about the world. And so what I noticed, there were 3 reports that got my attention. The first was the Washington Post. Now, the Washington Post reported that the pandemic has caused nearly 2 years of collective trauma, and that many people are at a breaking point. Wow. That's pretty disturbing. Would you agree?
Oh, very. And I think we're aware of it, but just didn't know how bad it is.
Of course. And then you have the Psychiatric Times. Now, it reported that there is an overwhelming demand for mental health services. I've experienced that in my practice as well. Okay. And the third report came from the American Psychological Association, and it reported there is a surge in new referrals, and those referrals were for clients suffering with anxiety disorder, depression, and trauma-related disorders. Well, as a therapist, I found that to be true because I also received a surge, in fact, overwhelmed with requests for therapy services. And what's interesting, we have clients who are requesting not only therapy services, but African-American therapists. That I thought was really interesting. That's been a surge. But also clients with anxiety disorders, depression, and trauma-related disorders. And what's really interesting, Kelly, is that I have adults who are coming saying, I want to deal with my childhood trauma.
Okay.
Isn't that interesting?
Well, that's interesting. Because most people, and particularly African Americans, don't want to accept that there may be mental challenges. I don't know, maybe the stigma attached to that. And so if you're saying that has all changed, and even African Americans are coming out and saying, hey,
yes,
I need help. I need help.
Yes, I have men, women, and teenagers, young adults. It's really interesting. There is a cry for help. And they want someone that they feel can relate to their issues and concerns, someone who will value them as a person. So I'm really honored to be a vessel in this time, this crisis that we're having. And there are other things that I'm finding, that there are people who are wanting therapists who are Christians. That's been another request.
Really? Okay, now what do you suppose that is?
Well, if you think about the history of African Americans, we have a rich heritage when it comes to our faith. And so now you have this surge of African Americans wanting therapy, but then wanting someone who honors their faith. Okay. So that's pretty important to them. And it's interesting because I'll hear clients say, and not just African Americans, but there are others as well from different faiths who'll say, I appreciate the fact that you're spiritual.
Yeah, I was wondering, how do you get to that? Do you bring that up initially when you're counseling people, or?
Well, I encourage clients who don't know me to go to my website. That way they have all the information they need to know about me. There are no secrets. It is who I am. I mean, it's there, right? Black and white. And then if they have any concerns, I answer those questions, any concerns they have. But the goal here is not about my faith. It's about how my faith can provide the comfort, the support, the compassion, the unconditional love that everyone needs. Would you agree?
Right. Oh, I agree, definitely. And, you know, when you talked about that Washington Post study, I want to go back, or that the research done on that. I want to go back to that. It says many people are near a breaking point. So what does that mean when someone's at a breaking point? And how do you see that in your practice?
That's a very good question. So when I think of breaking point, I think of folks who have been dealing with trauma for years, just undealt with trauma they've never dealt with. So let's take a case of a person who has experienced childhood trauma of abuse. They've never dealt with it, so they suppress that trauma. We call it, they shove it behind the wall. But what happens is the body keeps the score. So situations, events occur, such as a pandemic. It triggers the trauma. Situations of violence triggers trauma. Abuse in the home, anything that is frightening, disturbing, uncomfortable, it triggers the memory, it triggers. And sometimes people don't even remember the trauma, but because the body keeps the score, it's amazing. It's an amazing phenomenon that they still experience the fear, the overreacting. A small incident occurs. Doesn't seem insignificant to anyone else, but to that person who has experienced trauma, it's major because it's triggering a soft spot. We call it a soft spot. So you have a trauma, you've not healed, so it's considered a soft spot. You shove it behind the wall, you don't deal with it, you don't process it, you don't heal. Something happens, it hits that soft spot. You feel the pain of it, so you overreact. So you may become violent. That's the breaking point. You've touched a soft spot, we call it hit a nerve. You've touched that soft spot, and the person overreacts. The overreaction is usually in disproportion to the incident. So you might have someone who is very violent. You might have someone who walks off the job. And you say, well, what was that about? The incident wasn't that big a deal. It wasn't the incident. We're talking sometimes layers of suppressed trauma and pain that people have not dealt with over the years. And you hit a soft spot and it's a breaking point. So this pandemic, for many, has been a breaking point. It has hit nerves and soft spots, things that they've never dealt with. For example, look at the losses many have suffered.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
One loss after another.
Not to mention
friends,
isolation,
family.
Yeah.
The isolation, loss of jobs, loss of homes, loss of relationships. That's a lot of trauma. Collective trauma, individually, as a nation, and not to mention all the things that are going on around us. That social media, if you become self-absorbed with that, how that can impact you as well. So we're talking just layers and layers, events after another. People reach a breaking point. Does that make sense?
No, it makes a lot of sense. And I guess, you know, what's interesting about, you mentioned the nation, that this actually happened under two separate administrations. And I've not heard from either one of them much about, we're a nation that's hurting. We've been traumatized.
So true.
How are we going to heal? How are we going to come together?
Oh, that's so true.
Yeah.
And that's what I find disturbing. But, you know, if you say, well, our leaders, but I say, what about our religious leaders? People who are in the business of healing. What have we done collectively as churches, as a community, to reach out to the hurting? So I find those things very disturbing, and that's why I'm here today. As one person, just wanting to reach out and wanting to make a difference and let people know there is help for you. You know, there is hope and there is healing for you. You're not a hopeless case. You may feel hopeless, but feelings are not facts.
Okay. So let's identify those disorders. And I know earlier you mentioned anxiety, depression, and trauma-related disorders.
Yes.
The signs, the symptoms, because we hear those terms all the time, and the treatment. We don't know what they really mean. What is it? What do they look like? What does anxiety really look like?
Absolutely. So the clients that I deal with have anxiety disorders. With anxiety comes depression, low self-esteem because they feel like they're going crazy, out of control. I also see clients with trauma-related disorders, and with that also you'll have depression, you'll have low self-esteem. So those are the combinations of things that I deal with. Now, I also have the grief and loss due to trauma, due to the pandemic. And so that's been another piece. But just looking at anxiety by itself. Anxiety for me, I call it a thief because it robs people of their peace of mind, their joy, their sense of safety. When you think of anxiety, we're talking extreme fear, worry. We're not talking about the everyday fear or worry that you would have if you have a loved one in the hospital and you're worried about the outcome. Or if you have an exam coming and you're nervous. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about extreme, persistent worry. Here's an example. Someone fears spiders to the point they won't go in an old home because they have made an assumption that there are spiders. They won't even go to the movies if there's a spider in that movie. That's extreme, okay, in nature. So when you think about anxiety, some people don't. They can easily identify depression because we talk about depression a lot, right? We've heard about depression. So to some extent, people know those symptoms. But anxiety is tricky because anxiety affects 4 areas of your life: your mind, your body, your emotions, and your behavior. So let's just talk about the body, for example. I'll just name a few symptoms. Heart palpitations. Some people get that confused. If they're having heart palpitations, what do they think is going on?
Having a heart problem, not necessarily.
Numbness in arms and legs, tingling sensation. What would they think if they're having tingling sensations or numbness?
Wow, okay.
Then you have the shaky, stomach ache, vomiting, diarrhea, constipation. Those are just a few.
Wow.
Physical.
I wouldn't even think of those.
Yeah, and sometimes people get it confused. They think it might be gastroparesis when it might be anxiety, nervousness, vomiting. You see how some of these symptoms can mimic other medical concerns?
Okay.
That's just an example physically. So mentally, confusion, not able to focus, distracted easily. When you talk about your emotions, nervous, uptight, jittery, irritable. And then behavior, we have the fight, flight, freeze response. Some people shut down when they're anxious, afraid, and worried, do nothing. Some people flee it. They avoid it at all costs.
Okay. So we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk more about mental health disorders, particularly anxiety, and the others as well when we come back.
Hey, let's check out this park. Oh, wow, that's really cool. To find a great local park or forest near you, go to discovertheforest.org.
And we're back here on Inside Indy, and we're talking about this mental health crises that we're in the midst of with Dr.-elect Starr. And we were talking about anxiety. And I know you're going to go into treatment for anxiety, but I want to describe quickly a symptom that I feel that I might have some anxiety. My hand will shake. And when I was a younger woman, there was something I feel like was traumatic for me, and I developed this. And normally it doesn't bother me, but when I get anxious, I guess, it'll do this. One time I was robbed in my car by a gunman, and I remember looking down, and not only was it shaking, it was like flopping. And I was just that nervous, and I didn't even realize I was that nervous. I looked down, I was like, why is my hand doing like that? But it seems when I get that way, it goes here. I don't know what it is about that hand, but I say that happened to me when I was like maybe 24. So
Well, I think the key is you just said it. When I'm frightened, I feel frightened, nervous, scared, my hand shakes. That's an indication there that it could be anxiety.
Okay.
Yeah, and that is one of the symptoms. We didn't have time to name all the symptoms, but that is one of them. Shaky hands, shaky legs. And you'll see some people just sit and just kind of
Well, I do that all the time, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this, it'll just come over me, and I'm not even aware of what I'm feeling. And then I look down like, oh gosh, I wish I could stop that. So
You can ask yourself, what am I thinking? That will help you identify what's troubling you, causing your body to respond.
okay. Treatment for this
right.
or any other
Well,
anxiety issues?
Well, therapy is a great modality. There's cognitive behavior therapy that teaches you how to monitor those thoughts that I just shared with you, and then correct the thoughts, change them, replace them. So that's cognitive behavior therapy. And then there's also exposure therapy for folks who are avoiding things because they're very frightening. And with the therapist and the client, they gradually learn how to face that thing that is terrifying them. There's also relaxation techniques, which I would like to share one with you today.
Oh, okay. Maybe it's going to help my anxiety here, at least the start of
And of
changing
course,
that.
medication. If
So,
that is
okay.
something that a person needs, they can talk with their physician
Okay.
and get something for that. So that's anxiety. So I'd like to move to depression, if that's okay with
go
you.
right ahead.
So depression is another one of those prevalent disorders that I described that was reported, and that's a persistent feeling of sadness, despair, and hopelessness.
Okay.
Persistent. So we all feel sad at some point in time, but this particular disorder, it lasts for months and even years.
Wow.
Yes. And this depression drains clients of energy, so it's hard for them to participate in therapy, although some do, but some find it very difficult because they don't have the energy. They sleep all day. They have feelings of hopelessness. They don't believe that they can actually come out of this state of depression. So it's difficult for them to take the steps, not impossible, but just difficult. So here are some symptoms, signs, symptoms of depression. You have persistent, sad, anxious, empty mood, feelings of hopelessness, pessimism, feelings of guilt, worthlessness. And remember I told you I work with self-esteem. That's an area that I have to address when they have depression. They have no appetite. Sometimes they may overeat, sometimes undereat. The things that they used to enjoy doing, they no longer have a desire. So those are just a few. Now, in my therapy, I do talk about causes. We won't have time for that today. But one example is some clients will tell me, you know, looking at that Facebook is depressing. And I'll go, really? Why? Because I see all these folks traveling all over the country, and I can't travel, and that's depressing. Or I don't have money to buy these things that everybody's buying or doing, and that's depressing. Or then others will say, watching the news and all the things that are going on, it just keeps me depressed. So those are some of the causes of depression.
Wow.
Many others, but that's just to give you a little idea of things that trigger feelings of depression. Does that make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense. And I guess when you were saying that about the Facebook and the news, I think for me personally, when I see things like that, and I'm tempted to think that way, I think when you get older, you're old enough to know that the way you think it is, that's not always the way it goes. That person
Right.
might be smiling on the beach, but they lost their mother 3 weeks before. I mean,
So
it doesn't
true.
that things aren't always the way they seem
Appear.
to be. Yeah.
Yeah,
And-
I had an example of that. I just posted a picture one day of the lake in California, in Chicago, I'm sorry. Just because that's one of the places I like to visit, right? I was just posting the picture. I didn't say I was there. It was just a memory. And someone saw that and assumed I was there in Chicago and wondered why I didn't visit them.
wow.
You're my friend and you came to Chicago and you didn't see me? And I was like, I just posted.
And now she's depressed because you didn't come to see her.
It's amazing how people read into pictures and
Right.
images and make assumptions.
Right. So some of that is you have to talk yourself out of that by reasoning and not letting those impulses kind of take over. And life doesn't work that way. Even as glamorous
Well,
as it seems, even
you
movie stars
can.
sometimes we're so shocked when they go through something. It's like, well, they're human, and that's not necessarily, that's not realistic.
Well, you can do that, but not everyone is able
Okay.
to do that. And that's where we teach them just exactly what you described. Noticing those thoughts. Are they realistic? Is it based on facts?
Good word, yeah.
If it's not based on facts, it's an assumption. Replace it with something that is realistic, that is truthful and empowering. See, that's cognitive behavior therapy.
Well, is that what okay.
Exactly.
I can see where that would work, though. I would see that.
Have to practice it, right?
Right. So, any other treatment?
So for depression, for those that need medication, they can see their physician, get a referral. For those that need it, normally if you have suicidal ideations or suicide attempts, that's highly recommended, but they can talk with their physician. Therapy is another as well. And then cognitive behavior therapy can also help with their thought processes.
Okay. Okay.
So, and then there are other things that they can do, such as exercise, just taking care of themselves, exercising, eating properly, and staying connected with positive support groups. So there are a number of things that can be done to help people, but it depends on the severity, because there is mild, there's moderate, and there's severe or moderate severe depression. So it just really depends on where people are with that disorder.
So, and you help them identify what they actually have when they come to see you. You know, and we've talked a lot about as if the person who's watching is the person who's going through it. But what about those people who are not, but they've got a relative or a sister or brother or father or parent, children going through that?
Well, that's why it's important to know the signs and symptoms. We weren't able to describe all of them, but it is important to be educated. You know, they can educate themselves, and they can also get information from their doctor regarding what are the signs and symptoms of depression and how can we support our loved ones. But knowing the signs and symptoms is very important.
Okay, okay. And we've got your information on the screen if people want to contact Dr. Starr, you have questions, you need counseling. She's here to help. She can make that happen. And so the information on the screen, and we'll keep it up there throughout the program. So you mentioned earlier about the relaxation technique. Shall we talk about that?
Yes. So this is good for folks who have anxiety disorder, depression, and trauma. I wanted to talk about trauma because I have so many clients who are struggling with childhood abuse and neglect, and adults. These are adults, but still struggling. And so oftentimes I'll use EMDR and I'll do a relaxation. I'll do several relaxation techniques.
Okay.
So I thought I would demonstrate one with you.
Okay.
If you're interested.
Sure. Let's go for it.
All right. So one of the things I do with clients is called imagery. I would like for you at this time to think of a place that is relaxing, a place of comfort where you feel safe. And you're going to think about this place in great detail, not fleeting, but in detail, using all of your senses. Can you tell me what this place is?
It's in Fort Lauderdale. It's a resort.
It's a resort.
On the beach.
All right. I want you to relax at this time. And I want you to get that image in your mind. And I want you to tell me, what do you see around you?
I see people sitting on the beach and people having lunch on the veranda. And I see birds and water.
And what do you see in the distance?
Ships.
Okay.
Cruise ships. I see the sun above and just a gorgeous view.
Now look all around you. Look for small details that you would usually miss.
Just the furniture that's on the beach and people working around that are serving people, and
Okay.
the lobby. I see the lobby if I go in, but I'm still on the beach right now.
All right. What sounds can you hear?
The ocean.
Are they soft or loud?
It's kind of loud. Yeah.
Okay. Listen closely to everything around you Keep listening to see if you notice any distant sounds.
Just kids. I hear kids laughing, playing.
Are you eating or drinking anything?
No.
Okay. What can you feel?
Just warmth, because it's warm.
What is the temperature?
Probably about 80.
Think of how the air feels on your skin and how your clothes feel on your body. Soak in all the sensations. Now tell me, what scents are you smelling?
Just that ocean smell is what I smell.
Is it strong or faint?
It's pretty strong.
Okay, take some time to appreciate all the scents. What you're seeing around you, what you're hearing, what you're feeling, and what you're smelling. Take it all in. And I want you to breathe in deeply through your nose 3 times and out slow through your mouth. And when you're done, let me know.
Done.
Okay, now I want you to put your feet flat on the floor and feel the floor under you. Touch your body, feel your body. All right, now tell me, what was that like for you?
It's very relaxing. But of course the stress came back because we're almost out of time.
Well, that's one of the techniques
Okay,
that I use
okay.
for my clients that are struggling with these disorders, and there are others as well.
Okay. Well, you have helped us out tremendously. And folks, again, we have a mental health crisis in the city, state, country, and it's time we address it. And again, all of Dr. Starr's information is on the screen. I encourage you to reach out to her and to go through this technique or whatever she might prescribe for you. But we appreciate you coming on so much.
Thank you, Kelly.
Dr. Alex Starr, thanks so much for joining us.
I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
And thank you all for joining us. This is Inside Indy. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
They say you don't have to be so strong, but this is my mother, my purpose. Strength is not optional. See, I lift her now like she raised me then, so I know my strength is super, but I'm still human.
Oh, look who's here.